everyone, and welcome to another edition of Clock Talk with Dr. Greg Brannon, founder and owner of Optimal Bio. And today we're going to talk about his new book that's out there called Restore. And right now, you can go on Amazon and buy it. And when you do, you'll notice that he is a bestseller, gold medallion author. So congratulations, Greg.
Thank you, Jim.
As always, 15 minutes of action-packed adventure.
Yeah, action-packed.
And today, to start, let's just talk about why did you write the book? What inspired you?
Jim, the last 12 years of Optimal Bio and our growth, we've been growing this, helping people's lives. We wrote our first book. It was really, the first book was really sciencey, the hormone handbook, laid the foundations of hormones. But as you see, the name of the book's Restore. And I want to get back to what their base is, with their foundation to build their life. And I really believe we have so many stories to talk about. We get stories every single day. And the goal was to go through why are hormones so important. And I basically took a young man's life from the womb as he ages, and also a woman's life of how, when she's young, how she ages. Because aging is not the enemy. I really believe this idea of aging is a gain of wisdom. A living life is if your life is just a one place to live. I love the liberty of life. But I want people to understand the reason why we're aging at a much faster rate and earlier chronic diseases. And that's what Restore talks about.
Sure.
Let's restore the body.
So yeah, so we're going to get into that in additional Clock Talks.
Mm-hmm.
So when you first started the business, and then when you wrote the first book, Hormone Handbook,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's years that have gone by, you seeing thousands of patients, military, young guys,
Yep.
to older people, male, female,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the stories that you could share that have inspired you to write the book?
The big one, Jim, was this. I was an OBGYN for 28, 26 years. And when couple things, young women having cycles and having PMS and depression, and perimenopausal, menopausal women, when they have their complaints, the standard of care is here's an antidepressant. And that drove me crazy. These women were not, there's a place for antidepressants, there's a place for that. But to have 85% of them on it, just because they have these moods and these feelings, bothered the crap out of me. I'm a father of 6 daughters. I have a lovely wife, and I was a gynecologist. And I just don't believe putting Band-Aids on things is important. That drove me for the root cause of how the body works. It's all biochemistry applied. That's all it is. So when you look at a woman's cycle, which is very complex, men, pretty simple. We make sperm every 15 minutes, and we just do that. We make our hormones that way. Women have cycles. Every day, their levels are different. So moods are very dependent upon estrogen levels. And so the thing was, I want to look to the reason why they're having these complaints and why they're having them a lot earlier and a lot more frequently. And that led to this whole idea of finding the root cause and what hormones do in our body. Because we think about sex hormones, all they think is about intimacy, always. And they affect every cell in the body. They affect the cells in the body from the womb. And here I am, an OBGYN, ultrasound little babies all the time. Never really thought about it, but how important the hormones are actually when they're forming their genitalia, when they're forming their nervous system. So it just got me to the point of, like, if you had a car and you're driving down the street and it stops, the first thing you don't think about is, well, I need air in the tires. You think, there must be no gas. So that led this whole process, because I have multiple stories of women talking about their postpartum depression, their PMS, their menopausal change, and how by replenishing their hormone levels to youthful numbers, and youthful numbers of the past, not today, their life's back. And that's restoring, Jim.
Yeah, so I know in past Clock Talks, we've talked about why hormones are significantly lower, than they were 30, 40 years ago and what have you. So you speak a little bit about, obviously, the female patient and obviously your background, for 20.
Well, I got some male stories.
20, exactly. So let's talk about that. So what about some of the male stories as well, especially the younger generation?
Well, I want to start with that, because when we wrote, I was very fortunate to deliver a lot of babies out of Fort Bragg. And I was as an OBGYN. So I got to meet the men well and became, buddies with them during this wonderful life of having babies. And with the men going off to tours, got to know their families over time, deliver 1, 2, 3 of their babies. And the first book we wrote, some of these young men, let's say young, 30, 35, 40, said, Greg, I got a copy of your book and I read it. I have every symptom in the book. And I'm looking at guys like, look at Hercules. And you're like, there's no way you're a low T. I never looked down that male path. And then I started drawing their numbers. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So we started looking at their numbers. And what I'm finding, Jim, is it's the younger man is lower than the middle-aged man. Therefore, the middle-aged man was even higher when they were younger. So we're seeing and we probably had 50, 60,000 placements in our practice. So I'm seeing a 25-year-old man, I could guarantee he's in the low 200s.
So let me clarify that for a second. So let's say the 25-year-old male 30 years ago would be at 1,200.
Yep.
Now he's at 400.
Well, I'm seeing more 150 to 300 every day.
And then the middle-aged 45-year-old, I use it as a ratio based on age, or is he actually higher than
He's actually, true numbers, he's higher.
Wow.
I get a 40-year-old guy, he's usually 400 to 500 every time. And the sad part, our military men, and some women we have as well, they are even lower than the average male out there. And so I started doing studies on TBI, on PTSD. You start looking how the neurophysiology, the neuroendocrinology aspect of the body. It's very interesting. The brain itself, we'll call it, it's made out of cement, we'll say bone. The way the hypothalamus anterior sit in this thing called the optic chiasma, it's a bony enclosed structure. There are 6 hormones down there. And because of TBI, that part shakes. So the trauma causes trauma to the brain. The 2 hormones that are the furthest away from the blood supply are affected first, growth hormone and the gonadotropins, which makes testosterone. So I'm seeing it more in our men. And you look at PTSD, you look at TBI, it's like, so we'll get back to fuel. We're seeing their lives come back because, you know, they may be in physical great shape, but they have all the symptoms we talked about before. But that really, so that it was the stories we have. In fact, every story of it, we have a SEAL Team 6 member tells his story about, he was what we call a breacher, which is the first guy in. He talks about all his work at Walter Reed, all his concussions, his TBI, some of his PTSD. And he talked about his life change when he got his hormone levels back. And so that was like something I never thought about, Jim, being a gynecologist, to go down this path. But it is very interesting. Bottom line is, you cannot tell the book by its cover.
So going back to the book experience, what was it like writing the hormone handbook? What inspired you to do that?
Here's the thing. Me included, when I don't hear about hormones, especially BHRT, I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew everything. I'm a OBGYN board certified. I used to be a clinical professor years ago. And I was like, I know this stuff. But you only know what you read. You only know what you read. And when you start reading things about, I thought the idea of that a bioidentical structure hormone or versus a synthetic hormone was basically just marketing. But no, pharmacy companies cannot own an organic molecule. There's no profit to be made in that. And I started making more common sense that the body knows its structure it needs. So that led me down this whole path. And the hormonal handbook was to get these fallacies out. So I used to give a lot of seminars around. I'm not a great writer. I read a ton. So I give seminars there. One time I videoed it and got it transcribed. And then we got an editor and edited the book to give the hard, cold facts. That's what the hormone handbook does. And then, so what really drove me, Jim, is the misinformation out there. Like, hormones cause cancer. Well, whoa, whoa, whoa. What hormone? Synthetic, bioidentical. Which one? E1, E2, E3. Is you talking human testosterone or non-human testosterone? That's why this whole broad spoke to throw everything in one bucket drove me nuts. So I want to be as clear as possible to delineate the idea of what we're focusing on here. Because you'd never say insulin's a hormone. You can live without insulin. No, you think you'd be crazy. And the most abundant hormone in the human body that's active is testosterone. So it was to drive people to have a resource to look at all the articles I've read, put a simple area to go down there and just, talk about prostate cancer, breast cancer in a simple place.
So I know you alluded to before, but the hormone handbook is paperback.
Yep.
It's literally a handbook.
Yep.
Couple hundred pages, maybe.
About 120.
Yeah. This obviously is hardcover.
Yep.
It's more pages.
83,000 words.
A lot of words. So why the bigger book?
The bigger book, I wanted to I was torn here. Talking to you, I wanted more of a sciencey book. But then that's not the stories we're getting. So this book is, I want it to be a narrative. And the whole idea of, like, we'll give an example, Ponce de Leon searching for the fountain of youth, the Crusaders looking for the Holy Grail, this idea of living forever. And I thought to myself, yes, but that's not it. Mark Twain's quote was, youth is wasted on the young. And that was when I started thinking, the optimal holy grail, the optimal final, whoa, piece of resistance, it'd be the biochemistry of a young person with the wisdom of an old person. And that drove me to say, let's tell a story of how the body works, what hormones do in the body in simplistic form during our adolescent age, our teenage age, and go through what it does, what it does, every, diabetes and neurodegenerative function, all that stuff. And then show symptoms of it, of what happens when they're not at optimal levels. And then the back of the book is a lot of sciencey stuff on how the hypopituitary axis works. And I put a chapter in there about liberty. I'm a freak on liberty, and I believe medical liberty is what's going to bind us. If you don't own your body, you own nothing.
So from your perspective, what do you want out of the book? The Hormone Handbook, I think, was something where a patient gets it, or a potential patient. It's very easy to carry around, throw in their car, refer to it every once in a while, send it out to somebody else. Obviously, you probably want somebody to buy, restore. But in addition to that, what do you want that patient to do with that book? Is it a referenceable material for them on a regular basis?
Yes, it's a reference, but it's a story. You're a woman, read it. I have a whole section. I have a chapter called It's More Than Estrogen. On the man section, I have It's More Than Testosterone. So, because I think they're gonna relate to when they were a teenager or younger women, and all different ages. And we go through every age group of who we are and what hormones do at every age group, and how menopause has been pushed out further. Same thing with man and andropause. So I want it as a narrative because it's a story first. The back is a lot of reference. An example, I have 84 articles just on breast cancer alone. We have over 371 references. So I want a science person look at it and go, okay, Greg's stating this, where's the papers? Boom, here's the papers. At the same time, a non-science person, I give it to my cousin who's an author, and he's not a sciencey guy. He goes, wow, there's a story here. And that's what I want it to be, a story. Because you have a story, I have a story. And I wanted the stories told that what it does, what it does in our body. And that's very, very important. What I really want, Jim, is the whole thing is when you have these complaints, it's not in your head. That drives me insane.
So if we were going to do a movie on Restore, what would the character look like?
Well, Denzel would play me, but we'll discuss that later. But the character, that's a good one, Jim. Maybe you have it would be a spectrum of a person's life, from a teenager, from a young adolescent, even in the womb, like the babies grow out, and tell a story of growth, a story of growth, a story of falling down, a story of coming back up. I think that's what life is. It's success, falling down, but what everybody's life is their own. And I think we got to be able to do that. I put a quote in the book by Arthur Schopenhauer. He's a Prussian philosopher in early mid-19th century. And he says something that really drove me to this whole optimal bio 12 years ago was, you don't understand the three greatest blessings of life: your health, your youth, and your freedom, while you possess them. Only after you've lost them. And that's what drove Restore. So that's what got me going. And the idea, Jim, too, I know it's a little nerdy, but Frederick Bastiat is a great philosopher on liberty. And I really believe that liberty demands responsibility. So I want to put something in somebody's hand to gain knowledge, to ask doctors questions.
Sure. And it is the character, you mentioned there's some ups and downs in the book for the character. Are they seeking information? I don't want to use the word cure, but solutions to their health problems, and being turned down by the medical community?
I have a couple of those stories. I got a lovely woman who tells a story about, she is depressed, didn't feel terrible. She's on 3 or 4 antidepressants, goes on hormones, our bioidentical hormones, the pellets. Her life's changed. She's off all 4 medications. She goes back to her doctor, and her doctor says, well, you can't stay with me. You got to quit those and go back on these antidepressants because they cause cancer. Fallacy. So we hear that every single day. To me, the biggest part, I'm not convinced doctors on this, Jim, but I wish they'd do more research on this. And they have a whole section on the FDA reviewed pellet therapy in 2018. They looked over 16,500 articles since 1935. They threw out all, kept 11,000, threw out more, and their conclusion was there's not enough evidence. We need more studies. 16,300 articles. So it drives me crazy on this, Jim. And that's the part that's the most frustrating, is when people say, well, doctors will say with compute impunity, well, it does this. Really, where's that paper?
So on that note, though, with some of these doctors, obviously, Optimal Bio has been around for 12 years now. What happens when a patient sees the light, they're coming to Optimal Bio? Are they then changing their other doctors and going elsewhere in the future, or just are they just taking this medical liberty and this freedom of choice and applying it with the confidence now that they can go someplace else?
I think most are doing that. Jim, we used to have no doctors as patients. Now we have a score of patients that are doctors because they just can't believe we've missed this. But and I try to make it, I use an example as insulin. You would never tell a type 1 insulin, work out harder, do this, eat better. Of course you would, but you'd first give them the dang insulin. We tell people with extremely low hormone levels, it's your fault, work out harder, do something more. That makes it even worse. The cortisol gets thrown out thing. So I just want people to be educated, Jim, to be their biggest. I believe the king and queen is in the mirror, and Restore does that for you.
Fantastic. It's a heavy book, packed with lots of information. Another great 15 minutes of Clock Talk with Dr. Greg Brannon.